Well, thankfully, Kingston, Jamaica will likely avoid the absolute worst of Melissa. That's not to say we're going to see very significant impacts there in the eastern part of the island, but by far and away, the worst of it will be on the central and western side of Jamaica as we go through tonight, tomorrow, and on into tomorrow afternoon. But of course, everybody's going to see a ton of rain. That is a catastrophic threat that is going to be accompanying the approach and movement of Melissa through the island of Jamaica. And there it is, the latest advisory. If you're just tuning in, you're wondering, wait, what hurricane are we talking about? It just happens to be a Category 5 hurricane, and that wind is probably an underestimate based on every piece of information that I can find. These are some of the most intense winds I've ever seen from the dropsondes coming back from the hurricane reconnaissance missions, over 200 miles per hour at several hundred meters above the ground. You might think, well, we don't live that high up in the ground. Well, some people do in Jamaica because there is that kind of terrain there. So I think, unfortunately, most things in the way of that kind of wind will be leveled, destroyed completely. But thankfully, there is a little bit of good news here, I guess, if you can call it that. This is an incredibly compact tropical cyclone with hurricane force winds, 75 miles per hour, really only extend out about 25 miles from the center. Now, let's hope it stays that small. It probably gets a little bit bigger, but that's tiny. And once you're outside of that, you're in tropical storm force winds. Of course, this is not including the heavy rainfall threat, but the catastrophic winds are in a very, very tiny little area in the inner edge of the eye wall. Let's say maybe 8 to 10 miles from the geometric center of Melissa. So that's, I guess, the picture of it right there. And you can see it's kind of wobbling around. Here's the most recent path that it's taken and not moving much. And by the way, moving at 3 miles per hour and maintaining a Category 5 intensity is pretty much only possible about where Melissa is. You can't do that in the Gulf of Mexico. It would weaken itself due to the upwelling of the ocean or the Gulf. And you couldn't do it in the Western Atlantic. You do the same thing. But here, the oceanic heat content is so high, it doesn't matter. That depth of the warm water is so significant. No matter what upwelling is going, it still has all the energy to work with it needs. Hurricane reconnaissance is in there like that on their most recent pass. I didn't get a chance to look at the vortex message, but the Hurricane Center went ahead and went to 908 millibars. So clearly, this is at the very highest end of the scale. And it's, again, tightly compacted. You might think, how do you get this kind of wind with a 908 pressure or even maybe 180 to 200 mile per hour winds with that kind of pressure? Well, it's so tight. The pressure gradient is insane. And hence, the NOAA plane, by the way, the other hurricane reconnaissance mission, had to turn around, not because they were experiencing severe turbulence, but because they were experiencing severe extreme turbulence with many G's up and down, and that is very dangerous. So the NOAA plane had to turn around. The Air Force reconnaissance still in there, and you can see what is going on in the center. Not much. You can actually, from space, pretty much, maybe some stratus clouds in there, but see the ocean surface. Extremely warm conditions and dry conditions are in the interior, and only a couple of miles away is the unearthly tempest with winds way over 150 miles per hour, among the highest winds I've ever seen, as I mentioned, on a dropsonde. So there we are, rain right now impacting parts of southern Jamaica. Unfortunately, I don't have any weather observations to report, but it is unlikely we're seeing really significant winds. That comes later as the approach of Melissa tracks, about like this. Now, the area in blue, these are tropical storm force winds, according to this one model. The area in red, where the hurricane force winds are, according to this one model. And those are here even as we go until 9 o'clock tonight. Here's perhaps of some of the locations that you might find familiar. If you've ever been to Jamaica or have interest there, this is a good point of reference. As we go into tomorrow morning, we could see extremely destructive hurricane force winds again in the eye wall. Probably not so much outside of the eye wall, but in the eye wall. And certainly even on the north shore here, those winds in Montego Bay, for example, don't sleep on those. Those are going to be very significant as well as they're coming off the Caribbean there as well. So this is going to be a very dangerous, destructive, and impactful and catastrophic event on so many levels. The wind, thankfully, compacted near the center. The rain covers pretty much over the entire island, and the same could be said for eastern Cuba as we go into yet another landfall likely on Tuesday, and then perhaps even finally moving through the Turks and Caicos as we go into Wednesday morning. But Jen, I talked about the wind, but you have much more on the rain, which has got its own catastrophic influence as well.
Yes, the rain and a little bit of surge too. And Greg, I did look at that vortex message for you. The flight level winds were 179.5 miles per hour, and the pressure was 912. So at that most recent vortex. Let's look at the forecast. And we expect a landfall of either a Cat 5 or a very strong Cat 4. It's going to be sometime later tonight into tomorrow. We will be watching it approach the coast of Jamaica. Again, with the slow movement, that definitely leaves some room for uncertainty in that exact timing of the track. But it will start to pick up some speed by the time it crosses over Jamaica and then approaches Cuba. And then beyond that, some acceleration as well in the speed of movement. But there will be a surge risk, especially because it's been sitting there. One thing that's saving Jamaica a little bit is just the way the bathymetry is and the fact that we've got the mountains that are pretty much run the whole length of the island. And that's going to, though, right along the coastal plain, still give us a risk of surge, potentially 9 to 13 feet of surge, especially near and just to the east of the center. So that's going to be another risk in addition to all the rainfall risk that we see, with more than 12 to 18 inches plus of rain yet to come in Jamaica. In Cuba, we've got 8 to 12. We still have rain across the island of Hispaniola, especially on the south side of the island where we're getting some of those outer bands. And again, here too, we've got mountains that are helping squeeze out that moisture here. The terrain plays such a big role in creating the rainfall risk. Not only could it make the rain even heavier with that upslope flow, the onshore flow getting enhanced by the upslope flow, but also just the fact that that water is going to funnel down the mountains. We're going to have a mudslide risk. That's part of the very catastrophic concerns that we have for the island. So here's a look at the rain. Easily 8 to 12 inches of rain across this whole stretch, and there will be spots that get more than that here. And again, coming down in a very short period of time, so leading to that risk. Cuba, the eastern part of Cuba, dealing with that kind of rainfall as well. And this is going to be coming down today, tomorrow, and for Cuba into Wednesday. Jamaica, it'll be leaving by that point. Of course, we know the risks that come from big rain events like this. Here's some safety tips. Avoid driving into water of unknown depth. Test drinking water. Wells should be pumped out. Don't use fresh food that has been in floodwaters, and stay away from power lines. This is something that we're going to be dealing with here in the aftermath of Melissa, Alex, for quite some time here. This is not going to be an easy one to recover from.